Okay, good evening, everyone. This is Sachin Karnik. Today is the 8th of January, 2025. Happy New Year to all of you, and thank you for those who are online live in this presentation/workshop. We will go straight until 7:30 in my initial presentation. You can interrupt me if you want, or just listen in, whatever you want to do. And then we'll kind of take it from there. And then if there's more questions, comments, further explorations, we can do that. Please do keep in mind that there have already been 7 or 8 recordings done on the concept of selfhood and personal identity from the previous section. We're continuing on that a bit further today in the next section. So first of all, the original language in section number 2 is as follows. The understanding of selfhood as distinguished from personal identity, forms a cornerstone of human cognitive and philosophical studies. What does that mean? Now, there's 2 separate concepts. These are constructs. This notion of selfhood versus personal identity. All right, so selfhood implies a unique and individual perspective intrinsic to each person, encompassing the spectrum of their experiences and perceptions. Let's take a look at that sentence carefully. We're going to break these sentences up step by step, okay? So this sentence here states that selfhood implies unique and individual intrinsic perspectives to each person. We have a sense of uniqueness. I feel that I'm separate. I feel that I'm something special compared to others, something different from others. Unique and individual perspective intrinsic to each person. And there are, of course, a whole spectrum of experiences in my life. And there is also a massive spectrum of perceptions. Right? So the concept of selfhood is firmly anchored in the first person perspective. I have my perspective of my own experiences, my own perceptions, etc., accentuating the unique thoughts, feelings, and experiences that are directly accessible only to the individual in question. My unique thoughts, my thoughts, feelings, and experiences are unique to me. Okay, so these aspects in these first 3 sentences is what we see here is really about what is a good summary of what is meant by selfhood. This is actually like a review from the last section. Now, in contrast, personal identity is a broader concept that pertains to characteristics that render individuals the same, in quotes, across time, or potentially analogous to others. Now, let's break that one up. Let's be very clear. Now, personal identity could mean the following. It could mean that it's a much broader concept that pertains to that sense, that characteristics that each individual has of sameness. I still feel that I'm the same person that I was. Something is same about me that was yesterday, that was a year ago, 5 years ago. So that is across time, right? So selfhood is referring to the spectrum of experiences and perceptions. Do I have a spectrum of experiences and perceptions? Of course. On a day-to-day basis, on an hour-to-hour basis, on a month-to-month, year-to-year, decade-to-decade-to-year basis. It's a massive spectrum. Massive spectrum. So the word selfhood, the way it is operationalized or the way it is been theorized by various theoreticians that have been referenced in the original text, is that they have operationalized selfhood versus personal identity this way. So we have to go really careful with this to make sure it's really clear, because these are difficult concepts. Is it true that I am a unique person and I have my own intrinsic perspective about me? Yes, I would say so. Sachin's perspective on this is yes, I think that's the case. Is it so that there's a spectrum, massive spectrum of experiences and perceptions? Of course, there's all kinds of experiences with family, with friends, with all the 12 dimensions of life, everything. All kinds of perceptions are there, sensations are there, it just goes on. So selfhood is firmly anchored. Notice the language carefully. My sense of my own uniqueness with my experiences and perceptions is firmly anchored in the first person perspective. It's my perspective. It's my experience, my relationship with my father. My relationship with my mother is not going, no one else is going to have that same relationship with that being that I call mother and father the way I have it. My relationship is unique to me. There's a very powerful uniqueness in this. All right, so this is selfhood. Now we're using these words the way that they are operationalized, theorized, and constructed by multitude of researchers that are in the main text. Now, in contrast, personal identity is a much broader concept than selfhood. And this is good to try to unravel this because it goes back to the notion that there is something that is same across time and potentially analogous to others. Other people also have that experience of sameness, that I'm still the same person at the core, we say that, year to year to year, although my thoughts and feelings and emotions and perceptions and experiences are all changing, but there's something about me that's still the same. And now, what would that be? Let's go to the last sentence in this paragraph. Let's put that in blue. We have to go very carefully and slowly. So this sense of sameness, which is personal identity, encompasses societal roles, traits, and characteristics that define an individual within a communal context. So this is actually a review. Everything I'm talking about here is like a review from the last 4 or 5 sessions. But it's good to review it again. So this encompasses societal roles, traits, and characteristics that define an individual within a communal context, extending beyond the boundaries of personal experiences and perceptions. Who I am, the way I see myself as a consistent person, the researchers would say that this has to do with my societal roles in my family, in the society, etc. The traits that I have, the personality traits that I have, the characteristics that I have that define me as an individual in the context of community. That I cannot say that I am the same individual across time without the context of community. That we are existing as individuals, or the sense of psychological identity, personal identity, is in the context of community, where roles, traits, our characteristics are all part of that sense of sameness. And that extends beyond the boundaries of personal experience and perception. Personal experiences have a certain boundary. There's a whole list of personal experiences a person does have. There's all kinds of perceptions, but there's a boundary there. That's interesting also, that there's a boundary of personal experiences and perceptions, but the sense of sameness that we are referring to in psychological terms has to do with community context, where traits, characteristics, roles, and many other such phenomena are connected in the community through the mind so that we are able to develop the sense of sameness. I know that's a mouthful. That's why this is difficult. The subject is very, very difficult to understand, and it is it's like almost like at a doctoral level of understanding. But we can understand if we break it down carefully. And please do ask questions. All right, let's go to the next paragraph here. The distinction between selfhood and personality plays a pivotal role in human cognition. philosophy, and psychology. This distinction, right, that we just made right now, it plays a major role in trying to understand our human cognition. It plays a major role in trying to unravel the mysteries in many philosophical areas as well as in psychology. While both concepts aim to explain the essence of what it means to be human, they diverge significantly in their focus. Their focus is different. Selfhood emphasizes the subjective, experiential, and first-person perspective, whereas personal identity concerns the continuity and communal recognition of an individual across time and context. See, that makes it even very much more clear. Okay, so I don't want to repeat everything which I just said, but you can see the distinction. Hopefully that distinction is clear. Those of you who are following this step by step, please try to see the distinction as clearly as you can. Okay, because selfhood is emphasizing subjectivity. And remember, they do overlap. The concept of selfhood and personal identity, they intertwine together, but they're also thought of in different ways. So my subjective experience is my first person. It's experiential, first person perspective. Personal identity has to do with continuity, the sense of sameness, communal recognition of an individual. Someone sees me after 10 years and says, hey, that's Sachin. But there's some recognition of some sameness is there. Others recognize. We also feel we have some level of continuity. This nuanced difference is essential for understanding human consciousness, behavior, and social interaction. Now, why is this difference important? Why? For what possible reason? Well, there's three main reasons why. If we are trying to unravel the mysteries of human consciousness, this distinction between selfhood and personality becomes necessary. So human consciousness, our behaviors, just human behaviors of all kinds, again, are better understood with this distinction. And it is definitely a nuanced difference. It's nuanced because it's a subtle difference. It is not an easy one to grasp, right? And then, of course, our social interactions are based on these differences also. There's a lot of different points that come into the picture. Let's go further. So the distinction, meaning the act of differentiating two concepts between selfhood and personal identity, is of profound importance in cognition. Why? Because the cognition means the mental processes of acquiring and understanding knowledge. That is our cognitive ability. Our cognitive ability is enhanced further, again, this is my commentary, if there is good development of selfhood and personal identity. The personal identity, the socially and temporally recognized continuity of an individual, my development further from where I am, I'm developing my personal identity, but there's a core that is relatively stable. And it's within that core that I'm developing further and further, and I'm having my first person multitude of experiences. So they run together. They are in some sense parallel. Personal identity and selfhood are paralleled in one sense. They also intertwine in another sense. And once they intertwine together in the right way, in the best possible way, they enhance cognition, our mental processes of acquiring and understanding knowledge of all kinds gets uplifted. So there's a lot of stuff embedded within this. Developmental psychology, developmental stages from childhood, all of that is already incorporated in all of this. Okay, so there's implications for cognition. There's implications for philosophy, which is what? A systematic study of fundamental questions about existence, knowledge, and ethics. Fundamental questions, when we ask basic questions, this distinction between selfhood and personality has implications in the study of philosophy. How interesting is that? So if someone wants to study philosophy, We cannot study philosophy without having our own viewpoint. But our own viewpoint, our own perspective increases the more we study it based on personal identity and selfhood. There's no question about that. Every human being is a philosopher to some extent, which simply means a reflecting person on the questions of life, on life in general, reality in general. But if we are going to engage in a systematic study of fundamental questions, the distinction between selfhood and personality and the connection between the two becomes absolutely pivotal in the development of our own first-person viewpoint of big questions. I know it's a mouthful. You may have to listen to this again. Right? Okay, now there's implications for psychology. The scientific study of the mind. Psychology is what? The scientific study of the mind and behavior. That's at least one definition. If we're going to engage in systematic study and research and whatnot, our own capacity to create hypotheses, to create and to theorize makes a tremendous amount of difference in terms of the type of research that would be done with regards to the study of human behavior, human condition. Although both terms seek to elucidate the essence of human experience, they diverge in their epistemological and ontological orientations. Again, slowly and carefully to understand this. They're both trying to elucidate, meaning to clarify, to explain the essence of human existence. Personal identity and selfhood. We're just talking about that right now. But they diverge in their epistemological orientation, which is what? Relating to theory of knowledge and justification, which we're going to talk about as we move ahead. And their ontological orientation, which means pertaining to the nature of the being itself. Ontologically, the selfhood idea is that, there's a lot of experiences I'm going through. Are those experiences what I am? Or is there some core identity that exists independent of those experiences? There are many such questions. Many such questions. Now, you'll see some of these questions as we move ahead here. It is 7:21 already. I will speak for another 5 minutes or so on this next point, and then we'll open it up for discussion. I mean, I'm happy to keep going, but it's very heavy. This presentation is extremely, it's intellectually heavy, right? So that's why I don't want to present too much material. That will not be useful for us. I want to be able to have a conversation about it, have a couple of points for everyone to contemplate on, see what's coming up in your mind based on what's been presented. Otherwise, if it goes on too long, the whole mind will become jelly. It will just become a fuzz, and we don't want that to happen. So there's one more point here, one more paragraph I just want to quickly go over, and we'll pick it up on that next time. The subjective core of being. Selfhood could be thought of as a subjective core of being. Selfhood centers on the subjective, meaning pertaining to personal experience, and phenomenological dimensions. If you're keeping track of these words, the word phenomenology is from philosophy. It means the study of structures of experience and consciousness. Remember in our PTP program, I've talked about that before. That is the quality, quantity, dimension, depth, and structure. That structure word is referring to phenomenology. Although I didn't say that over there, but that's what it's referring to. It's the structure of experience, because every experience has a psychological, neurological, experiential structure. Every experience does. But what does that actually mean? We will go into that. You could write a dissertation on that question. Several dissertations on any of these things, So a phenomenological dimension and subjective dimension, both dimensions are part of selfhood. Selfhood centers around both of those dimensions because it looks at the first person experience. What does it mean to be a conscious agent? I feel I'm consciously speaking to you right now. I have a sense of me, my body, my identity, my sense of who I am. I am a conscious being. All right, so I'm a conscious agent. So there is selfhood. So the question of selfhood is relevant here. Because remember, the volume 1 that we have created is about self-mastery, but it lays the foundation to even to unravel the depth of what is meant by the self. Before we get to self-mastery, that will come much later on in this technical series. And this is a difficult thing to grasp. These ideas are very advanced ideas. All right, so let's go a little bit further here. I mean, for me, as you can imagine, I live on this stuff. But it cannot be presented in too much detail all at one time. So anyway, the concept of qualia, which is individual instances of subjective conscious experience, such as the redness of red, lies at the heart of this domain, underscoring the inaccessibility of internal perceptions. Who can see the color red other than me? I mean, I can see the color red for me. If you're seeing the same color, I don't have access to your mind to see what you're seeing. This is called inaccessibility, the impossibility of external verification, of internal perception. And this is the problem of qualia, right? And there's also something called the explanatory gap. So that goes back into the philosophical dimension. But you can see how it connects here, that selfhood, there's a couple of points, just as a review. It is subjective, my experience, personal experience, phenomenological dimension, that I can study my experience consciously. I can study the structure of my experience and analyze it and describe it. It's like where qualitative research comes from. It comes from really from phenomenological, philosophical perspective. In research, there's qualitative research and quantitative research. So qualitative research comes from phenomenology to a large extent, but not completely, but to a large extent. Okay, that's another, that's a more applied aspect of phenomenology. That's right. So selfhood is characterized by the first person perspective, the viewpoint of the individual's own lived experience. I go to Niagara Falls and I have an experience for 3 days at Niagara Falls. It's my experience. It's my first person perspective. I can describe it. Others can think about that, but they cannot fully access or replicate that experience. Only I have a memory of it. It was my experience. It cannot be replicated by external observers. That's fascinating, right? And we can go into that. And then that leads to the word qualia, which I've mentioned before many times, right? So there's a whole lot of stuff here. I mean, I don't want to go too much into it, but let's cut it off here for now. We've covered a lot of different, very evolved ideas. I want to give each of you an opportunity to make some comments. What questions do you have? What's not clear about this? If you want me to explain some other ideas further or anything, please, this is the time to do so.